and I'm going to bring out, hey, Carrie, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Good. Hold on just one second here, and then we'll bring Christine back on. Hello, Christine.
Hi.
Hello, hello. And then Anna, how are you, Anna?
Doing great.
Good. So that was my audio and video check for my next 3 panelists. And
brilliant.
And I want to welcome anybody who is watching. We're starting off our second hour of today's LinkedIn Live-a-thon for job seekers. And this, I had an idea. It was in the beginning of January. I'm like, I've got a large network. I've got LinkedIn. A lot of people are looking for work. I'm going to pull together a panel of people and do a LinkedIn Live-a-thon. I did one in January, and then I'm like, it was so great. I'm like, we're going to do another one in February. I'm planning one for March as well right now. But when I booked my speakers, I had everything kind of lined up, and I had an email from a speaker last night, and she's unfortunately has come down ill. And her talk, it was scheduled to be on salary negotiation in 2021. So just a quick backstory, and then we're going to jump into this topic. So this was last night around, I think 7 or 8, I got the message from the speaker, and it happens. You know, people get sick, you get cancellations, but I've got, I think 1,600 people registered for today. I'm like, we got to keep the show going. So I started reaching out to people, and we were talking earlier about personal branding. So think about personal brand. I started reaching out to people in my network and asking them one by one. And of course, it was the night before, 9 o'clock at night, nobody's available. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about this because we'll figure it out. But I put a post on LinkedIn at probably 9:30. And I put the post up. My daughter and I sat down to watch a movie. And then I'm like, the universe will take care of this. And it did, because all 3 of you either were delivered to me by another connection or raised your hand and said, how can I help? So I want to if we could just take a moment for each of you, maybe a minute for each of you. Tell us who you are and what's your business all about. And then we're going to be getting into a salary discussion here today. We're going to talk about salary negotiation for job seekers. So Carrie, why don't you start if you could?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. And Brenda, thanks for having me today. Excited to have this discussion. So I founded Purple Squirrel Advisors about 6 years ago. We're a boutique executive search firm. We're based in Troy, Michigan. We work primarily with companies, small to mid-sized companies, entrepreneurial owned or private equity backed. And we place leadership talent in 4 functional areas: accounting and finance, HR, operations, and sales and marketing. We have 6 people on our team, and we've covered searches coast to coast.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. And we met originally, I can't even remember, was it through Inform or Troy Chamber or one of those groups, but we've kept in contact. And I know you were a speaker at Together Digital not too long ago too. So, and it was like in my mind, I'm like, of course, Carrie, why didn't they think about Carrie? But thank you so much for making the time to join us here today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So I can't remember who was next. So I'm just going to pull up Christine next. And Christine, I think you were tagged in the post last night. I think that's how, this is our first time talking, right?
It is. It's really wonderful to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Robinson. I'm the resource management leader for Baker Tilly, a top 10 accounting and consulting firm with offices throughout the country. I actually serve on the People Solutions leadership team for the firm and oversee a team of very talented professionals that are based throughout the country as well. I'm here today really to offer some advice from personal experience as well as from the perspective of a hiring manager. And I'm really thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. And do you remember who it was that tagged you in the post?
We're mutually connected to Tom Daniels.
Okay, Tom Daniels. So I'll have to give a little shout out and thank you to Tom. And I was telling my family, and I'm like, somebody canceled, and my son's like, are you worried? I'm like, I'm not at all. I'm not at all worried. And even if I don't have someone jumping into that spot, I'll just pull up people from the audience to do it. But thank you, Christine, for making the time to join us here today.
Of course.
All right, Anna. So Anna, you came to me by way of, who was it? Was it Gina?
Well, we both have G as a BFF, but Adam, the CFO that gives you tips on how to employ your children without tax implications. He's amazing.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what you do. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about your business if you could.
So I'm the founder of CareerBFF. It's a job search strategy and career coaching solo entrepreneurship. I have been an agency and corporate recruiter for 15 plus years. So taking that experience to assist job seekers in, networking, marketing themselves, learning how to be visible on LinkedIn, and to negotiate offers and land work that aligns with their purpose and their passion.
Great. Well, thank you for the introduction. And did you see the post last night, or did someone tag you? Do you remember?
Adam tagged me.
Did he? That's awesome. So it just kind of worked out.
Yeah, to your point about like paying it forward, I had tagged him and introduced him to be on a different show like earlier in the year. So it all just comes full circle. It's beautiful.
There you go. Awesome.
So, Brenda, I wanted to just point out really quick, the way that I heard about it was my sister, Amy Whipple, actually sent me a text and said, hey, Brenda's looking for some help with salary negotiations. I think you should, if you're free, you should do this. And so that was how I heard about it. I wasn't really looking at LinkedIn last night at that time. So that's the power of the network for sure.
Yeah, I was even thinking, who's on LinkedIn Friday night at 10 o'clock at night? But I'm like, whatever, somebody will see it. And I knew because it was a large event, that might be a little bit of a draw for it too. So, all right. So we're talking here today, again, about salary negotiation. I'm going to pull our topic back up on screen for folks. And just to get our conversation started, and Carrie, since you're on screen, I'm going to start with you. People are watching. Some people are in career transition, or they may be working but looking, but feeling a bit unsure of, can I negotiate salary right now? Should I just take that offer, whatever they give me? I mean, what's your response to that?
Well, so it's interesting because I just recently posted a poll about like, what do people think? Are we in a candidate's market or a client's market? And I personally believe it's a candidate's market still. And so I would not advise for people to settle for something less than, what they think their market value is. There's still a lot of demand for great talent. And so I think that you have to go into any situation with confidence about what you bring to the table. And, there are some challenging issues going on, certainly, but that doesn't take away from the fact that employers really need great talent. And if it's actually now more than ever, is the way I see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anna or Christina, anything to add to that? Or Christine, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would love to echo what Carrie said. I think organizations understand the cost of a hire. If they lowball them, they're increasing the risk and the chance of turnover. So it's about quality talent. And so I'm seeing, these pockets definitely increase. I'm still seeing competitive salaries, and employers expect candidates to negotiate or, counter initial offers. But putting kind of my recruiting hat on, there's a lot of mixed information about how do you have these conversations? Do you wait until you get an offer, or do you have them, earlier in the conversation? And my personal preference is, have conversations earlier, because then you decrease the chances of the offer and the opportunity falling apart at the end of, and there's nothing worse than getting through, 2 to 10 interviews, depending on your level, and not being on the same page with your recruiters or your hiring managers.
Great. Christine, anything to add to that?
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I would say, know your worth. The fact that you're in a transition period, honestly, that's irrelevant. That does not diminish your expertise, your skill set, or the passion for what you do. And you really can't quantify that. So really project that confidence. It really comes across. And I would say too, from a hiring manager's perspective, speaking from experience, you want to see that confidence in the person that you're bringing on. Someone who knows what they're after and is displaying that professional maturity to be direct. Super important.
Yeah. And someone I asked during the interview, which made me think of one of the points that was mentioned earlier. At what point do you bring up salary? I mean, as a candidate, do you wait and let the interviewer, recruiter bring that up? And, if they ask, what are you looking for? I mean, how do you start that? It's like a dance, right? Like who says the first number, and at what point do you start that conversation? Christina, and since you're on screen, I'll have you start, and then we'll flip around if that's okay.
Absolutely. Again, I would say from experience, you want to be direct, as I was describing. So I do think it will naturally come across in the course of conversation. But to echo some of the points that were made earlier, you want to be direct right from the start. And most importantly, be consistent so that all parties are on the same page about what your expectations are right from the start. So once you have that figure in mind and you know what you're after, be crisp and clear about that number.
Okay, Anna or Carrie, did you want to add to that?
I agree. It's the delicate dance, right? And having been in the agency recruiter and corporate recruiter seat, it can be a slippery slope. In a lot of states, it's illegal to ask about salary. And, candidates do not have to divulge their previous salary numbers. I usually recommend they respond with a question and say, can you let me know what is the budgeted range for the salary? And to Christine's point, as a hiring manager, they have a budget. They do their staffing budgets every quarter, every year. So, if the recruiter's not saying, hey, Brenda, this position is, 60 to 75 with a 6.5% bonus, does that fall within or align with your salary goals? It can just be a yes or no question. And the candidate can say, well, I'm on the higher end, or of course, or I want to keep interviewing to learn more, and then I can more adequately answer that question, but we're on the same ball field.
Right.
Okay. Carrie, do you want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think it's important to be open from the beginning and have those conversations, because it's not going to be a good use of anyone's time if there's a misalignment on salary expectations and the budget. But I also think it's important to think about total compensation and other benefits that are really important, because we want to know that stuff right out of the gates as well. What's important to you when it comes to your compensation and benefit offering. Some candidates really need, or really value vacation over, an extra 5K of salary, or, there's different levers that you can pull when you're thinking about trying to get an offer to work. And so we want to know what all of those important factors are. And again, just like Anna said, we don't pin candidates down on what are you making, because it is illegal in many states, but we at least need to have a general discussion around expectations to make sure that there's going to be some alignment.
Okay, I'm just going to pause for a second here and say, Carrie,
there's a lot of good questions.
Should we be all jealous that you're in a very beautiful environment right now?
Can you negotiate working from a place like that?
Yes. Where are you in Florida? Where are you at today?
I'm actually in the Fort Myers, Florida area.
Oh, very good. And indulge us, because here in Michigan it's 20 degrees. What's the temperature there today?
It was in the mid 60s this morning, but it usually gets up to, it's been in the 80s all week. So
that's nice. And I know there's people that are watching from around the country and around the world today. So there's different weather climates. And I know there's a lot of really challenging things happening in the country right now in Texas and whatnot too. But our thoughts and prayers are obviously with everyone here today. I was paused and I'm like, are those palm trees behind it? Other people are, no, that's like a live background in behind you. I want to shift back to, we've had a couple of questions about researching, and John Keller in particular had asked this question. So I'll start with you, Carrie, and then we'll go to Anna and Christine. How do we determine what the salary should be? What tools, websites would you recommend? How should people be looking that up? Should they look it up?
Yeah, there's so many great tools online. There's salary.com. There's a variety of other websites. I just often, if it's a new search, a different market that I'm not familiar with, I'll just start with Google and say, what's the average salary for X position in this location? And I'll start getting information. But salary.com I found has some good information. And then I know you can use Glassdoor and other resources to find more company specific information. But I'd love to hear from Anna and Christine on other resources as well.
I love the LinkedIn salary insights. It's just linkedin.com/salary. And there's a lot of good insights in there. And I feel like their data is solid, because recruiters and organizations are putting job opportunities in the system with the salary range. And then having worked on the agency side, if you are working with agency recruiters, oftentimes they provide salary guides. So definitely be speaking to your account manager to see when they launch their, it's usually around this time for this current year.
Okay. And Christine, anything to add on to that in terms of places people could look or resources to verify the information?
Sure. All of what was already described, I agree with 100%. I also use LinkedIn for my personal experience. And I think too, one other point that was mentioned earlier is being open-minded and a little bit flexible about some of those points. Perhaps there's a creative solution, one that you haven't thought of, right?
Right.
stock options, expanded benefits, for example. So ultimately, you're not necessarily wanting to position yourself and be too tied to a specific number figure. Be willing to collaborate. Ultimately, from a hiring manager's perspective, someone that truly values what you're bringing to the table, they're going to want you to feel good about joining their team.
Now, wait a minute. You can negotiate things other than money. You can negotiate benefits. Like, some people might be watching and they may have missed that you just said that. So I want to come back to that point. What do you mean we can negotiate benefits? Could you clarify on that?
Absolutely. So, I think also, in today's world, given many of us are in the virtual environment, there's a ton of flexibility related to that. And so I would really encourage folks to think about all of those different things. What matters to you? So I heard a comment earlier around vacation, right? Perhaps you're dealing with virtual learning at school, right? People have a lot of different things that are on their plates right now that they're trying to balance and work through. And you might have certain things that are possibly more important to you than that salary figure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would comment, I think vacation is often something that we can tweak within reason. It's, there's usually a certain level of vacation that the employees are brought in at. But if you could say, well, listen, I'm 15 years into my career, I've already reached 15 or 20 days or whatever it is. I don't want to go all the way back to this entry point at your company of 5 or 10 days. Usually that's something that our clients can work through. But one other point that I would make is that on the topic of flexibility and negotiation, we've recently seen some clients kind of put in targets for once we achieve this level, then your salary will go to X. And they've laid out very clear paths of future increases, because maybe the company's at a size right now where they just can't accommodate, the salary expectation, but they're saying, hey, let's work together. We're going to create a path to get there, and we'll put it in writing along with these milestones. And so that's another way, if somebody's really thinking about the long term and the big picture, there's ways to do that if you've got an open mind.
Absolutely. The other thing I think I have seen some of is a sign-on bonus, which if you're, pulling talent from a competitor, that is a great incentive that you can also ask for. Or if the salary is in a budgeted range and you're a little bit over it, have those conversations early. Again, kind of going back also to some of the questions. If you're doing the discovery and asking thoughtful questions and really getting the lay of the land of the big picture of the opportunity, you're more empowered to talk about salary and negotiations and different things that you can do as you're leading up to that process. So, maximize those first phone calls and really, have your recruiter or that first line of contact give you as much details as possible, because it's harder when you're further along in the process to go back and then be like, oh, well, you only pay for the employees' benefits or not the spouses or the children. And so it goes back to really doing your due diligence, but then not being afraid to ask as well, and having, to their point, that confidence.
Good point. And I actually once upon a time negotiated the salary was fixed for the position. This was back in my corporate days. The salary was fixed, and I was taking a decrease in salary to take on the new position. And I had a good level of experience. I was very excited about the job. And I asked the question about medical benefits, and it was, it was the standard, I think it was a 90-day waiting period, and I had a family, and I said, part of what's holding me back from this is the benefits. So can you start me right away or after 30 days? I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to change a job and then leave. And, they gave me medical benefits right away. And I mean, that to me, I don't know what COBRA was at the time. I think it was like $1,200 or $1,500 a month for the family. And that would have been an additional decrease in my income. So is that common? Was that just an anomaly? Have you all seen that happening?
So I'll comment really quick on that. Yeah. So we've seen a lot of times it's very difficult for companies to amend their entry point into the particular benefits. But what we've seen instead is if there is that 90-day waiting period or longer, we've seen companies offer to pay for the COBRA benefits or a difference. So let's say your out of pocket is $300 a month, $300 for a month for the premiums. And if you go to COBRA, it's going to be $1,100. They'll get the COBRA bills and then get reimbursed for that difference via an expense report until the company benefits kick in. So that we've seen it, happen quite often, actually, especially with those longer waiting periods.
Okay. Anyone else want to add on to that? No, we can keep going. So I want to ask the question too, because I know like sometimes salary negotiation can feel weird. I feel like you've already told me you want to hire me, you want to give me this salary, you want me to join your team, especially if I'm not working. I'm like, I don't want to feel like I don't want to seem greedy by negotiating. I should just take what you've offered me, right? Thoughts?
I can take that one. I think it's very understandable. This is not a topic that we talk about frequently. It's very personal. And so it's very understandable that it's a little bit awkward when you're talking about salary. I think the thing is, it's par for the course. You should expect going into these discussions that this is something that's going to come up. So really, I would say the best way of dealing with that feeling of discomfort is to be prepared. Do your research. Don't allow yourself to be caught off guard by the question, as we've talked about. And really doing that research and being prepared is going to put you in a position of strength as you have these conversations. The other thing that I would say is keep in mind your hiring manager will likely see the way that you handle this situation as an indication of your working style as well. So that's an important piece. It gives them a little bit more insight into what they would have had from you versus what they would have seen in the interview process. And so really put some thought into how you're going to approach the dialogue related to the salary discussion. The ideal outcome is to establish yourself as someone who is confident, who knows what they want, but is also willing to collaborate to reach the optimal outcome and really leave feeling good about the discussion.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it also goes back to, those initial conversations with understanding why the position is open. What is the hiring manager's perception of quality? What keeps them up at night? What are the problems that this position is going to solve? And then as you're going through the process, it's kind of like the sales concept, like making sure that you're always hitting home the impact that you can make as a candidate, which is elevating that worth. You're demonstrating that confidence. You're getting them to nod their head, get excited. And then as you've continued to have those conversations, when you get to the table, you are at that, you have the rapport with the hiring manager and the recruiter. Everyone's on the same page. And that's why I think that full, because your recruiter is your champion. And if we don't have transparency and trust, we're chasing around the hiring managers to get feedback and insights and what their budget is, and if they have to get approval from a C-suite or a VP. So, it minimizes things falling through the cracks, and even just little things like understanding how long the position has been open, and highlighting your availability and offering, another point of negotiation is coming in as contractor, right? To kind of test them out, and then they can test you out. And I know, Carrie, you appreciate that with your business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing that I would say on the negotiation is we always encourage our candidates, like, first of all, like, you've got to begin the negotiation with, excitement about the role. Like, it's got, the opportunity has to be interesting. And it's like, listen, I want to be here. Everything I've learned sounds like a great fit. To your point, Anna, I know I can come in and add value. If we could just modify just a few of these things, that's going to make everything come together. And so I think kind of like the idea of like the sandwich of like, start with something positive, go to what you need, and then end with something positive again, kind of sandwich that harder message between two, positive messages about the role and the fit that you bring.
Great. And I want to ask another question too. This is something, I know people are wondering. I know somebody just want to ask it. What if during the interview, they don't give you a salary range, but they say, Brenda, we're very interested in you. Can you tell us what are your expectations for this position? Do you give them a range? Do you give them a number? Who'd like to start us off there? I see Anna pausing, so I'm throwing it to Anna.
Okay. Again, I'm going to go based on my own experience, and that is just asking more questions, because I feel like being naturally inquisitive and really being curious and excited, because, energy and enthusiasm goes a long way. That, again, going back to Christine's point, if you are asking these great questions, it shows that level of dedication and thoroughness. It's that beginning of what it would be like to work with you. And so there's nothing wrong with saying, At this stage in the interview process, I think we need to do some more discovery, get to know each other a little bit better before we dive into the conversation. And I'm saying that as someone who says, talk about money early and often, and also trust your intuition and in that regard. And all connecting all the points, if you've done the research, maybe had some informational interviews, looked at the data online, you have somewhat of a foundation, but it's a tricky question. But my personal, if I was sitting across the table from someone, would just be going back to some of those open-ended questions to get more insights, and then listen to my gut to figure out if I would be willing to give a range. And if I was, it would be a wide range, but I would have a base knowledge of what that typically would look like for that position. So it's tricky.
Yeah, I've heard, and maybe incorrectly, I'm not the salary expert at all, but I've heard, and I've used this approach myself, when they ask that question point blank, and whoever puts the number out first is kind of in a losing position, right? So what I've usually said is, well, thanks for asking the question. Based on the research that I've done, and at this point this is probably the second or third round. And if this is the first interview, I'm not giving them any number until I learn more. But at the second or third round, I've already done my research. Based on my research with this industry in our current market, with a person with my level of experience and my level of education, I believe the range would be 90 to 120. Mm-hmm. And based on my level of experience, I think I'd be more towards the top end of the spectrum. Because then it's market based. And I want to add to that too. I don't know if you all have heard of this, ladies, but if you go on Salary or Pay Scale or any of those sites, as women, I'm speaking to the women right now, do not put in your gender when you put in your salary calculator, because
right.
Put in female, it goes lower.
Right down, yeah.
See that? Yeah. So any other thoughts there on offering out numbers when asked that question point blank?
I would add too that there isn't a right answer. So don't get too caught up in it has to be a percentage, or it has to be a range, or I've put myself at a disadvantage. I think it's be direct. Know what it is that you're after. Generally speaking, experienced hiring managers know that they're not going to be able to attract top talent without compensating them fairly. So assume that positive intent, right? Right. You don't generally want to enter into a long, drawn out salary negotiation process. And keep in mind, you don't necessarily have to be on the defensive. So this isn't necessarily and shouldn't be a contentious conversation going into it. Absolutely, there is likely some wiggle room, I would think, right, in your initial offer, but overall, I would advise adjusting how much you want to push based on what you truly believe is reasonable, and if you started from that place of being reasonable.
Wonderful. Well, I see that we're starting to get towards the 11:30 hour, and I just want to say hi to Pam real quick. Hey, Pam, how are you doing today?
Good. How about you?
Good. Quick little audio video check there. And I want to thank each of you, Christine, Carrie, and Anna. This was literally last minute. If anyone's just tuning in now, I had a speaker cancellation due to illness last minute, and I put out and asked to the LinkedIn universe, and Christine and Anna and Carrie came to me or were referred to me. I want to give each of you the opportunity for any final comments, any shout outs you'd like to give or whatnot. So Christine, since you're on screen, we'll start with you.
If you don't take anything else away, I would say, again, I would just emphasize know your worth. It's the most important piece.
Awesome. And Christine, are you open to invitations for people if they want to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
All right, guys. And reminder, when you invite Christine to connect, mention that you saw her on today's LinkedIn Live-a-thon. If there's something particularly memorable, give her a shout out there. Thank you so much, Christine. And we're going to pull up Carrie next. Hey, Carrie.
Hi, sorry. Thank you so much for being here, Brenda. And it was great to hear from the other panelists, Christine and Anna. So my just parting words or parting comments advice would be really think about total compensation and what elements of the total compensation are most important to you and your family, and be transparent about those out of the gates when you're pursuing something so that you don't end up misaligned, at the final stages.
Yeah. And the key point too, I think, is negotiation at the point of the offer is where you have the most leverage too, Carrie, right? Like after you get the job, 6 months later, you can't come back and say, I want more money.
Yeah, no, exactly. You've got to figure those things out. What's going to make it long-term attractive, a good fit? Work on those things, before you sign on the dotted line.
All right. Thank you so much, Carrie. And then Anna, any final comments for the group here?
So I just encourage people to really try to nourish their relationships with their first line recruiters and ask those probing questions so that they can, be your champion and put the business cases in front of the right decision makers to get you what you're worth. And so that is my point. And I want to shout out Jihan as who's in the comments, and I'll be sure to go back and respond to a bunch of comments. And I'm always open to connections. So please feel free to reach out.
All right, ladies, thank you so much, Anna, Carrie, and Christine. It was a pleasure. Thank you for being my last minute impromptu speakers. This was a great discussion. Thank you so much. And I would invite each of you, if you'd like, you can go ahead and go out into the live stream. If you go out, you can find it on LinkedIn.